All right, Kyle Depiesse, and I want to make sure I say that correctly. So, Kyle, I first want to acknowledge you, and I know you live in the city that everything is
Hmm.
currently we're facing was started in. So, since this is very present in our hearts and our minds right now, I would love if you could share your heart with us and how it has impacted you by George Floyd's death and the movement that is currently taking place, especially in your hometown.
Yeah, well, and thanks, Eric. I'm happy to be on here, and I'm happy to share my experience, kind of being a little bit close to it. So we're in a suburb about 15 miles outside of the city, about southwest. And it's interesting because you watch the news and you watch the media and you watch everything unfolding. And the other day I was just working outside in the backyard, and I felt this nudge to, posting on social media is good. It's fine. It's good to share a voice, but it doesn't feel like enough. And being so close, I said, I have to get involved. And so my church was organizing a group to go down and serve and volunteer and help and clean and bring food. And I said, I'm going. And, being a little bit nervous to go, I still went. And I have to tell you, Erica, that the scene that was at 38th in Chicago, which was where George Floyd was murdered, is during the day and when I went on a Sunday was full of love and peace and respect and just this beautiful community of people coming together and just being there. And it's not what you see on TV. And it's just, I couldn't comprehend it. It's beautiful to see everyone coming together. I was so thankful to be a part of it and just to take time and pause and be in that space and reflect and challenge myself to say, okay, what can I do? How can I help? How can I continue to move forward the human race in any way possible? And it was amazing to be around all those people.
Mm. Wow, that must have been an honor, and I absolutely love the peaceful protests. It
Mm,
warms my heart so much to see, and I rather try to focus on that than the destruction because I got a little enraged by the destruction, and if I just root in the gratitude and the peace
hmm.
and see our world changing and shifting in the beauty of that, that's a better way to focus, I think.
Yeah,
So thank you for being a part of that. Well,
sure.
actually, I saw you post a picture with your son. You were reading. I think your son is about three. You said
Three. Yep. Yep.
three. You were reading a book with him, and was that book?
Yeah, it was a book called Unicorn Dreams by Lawrence Gordon, who is a guy that I met actually on my podcast. And he's a fantastic man. He's like, I'm not even joking, he's like Mr. Rogers. I'm not kidding you. He's a children's book author, a Black man. And he not only does he have his own children's book, he's coming up with another one, but he reads 2 times a week on Facebook Lives to whoever wants to tune in. And it's just beautiful. And he was on my podcast, an incredible human being. And I was sitting around looking at the library of books that we have for our son Cal, who's 3, as you mentioned. And I said, well, there's no one in here of any diversity. And I said, I have got to change really starts in our homes. And I have got to make some different decisions. And I can help my son simply by just having a diverse library of books for him to read and expose him to that, because that's the world we live in. It's not the bubble that we're in. So I think that was really important realization for me. And I just shared it, and a lot of people jumped on and showed Lawrence some love, and it was just really cool.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that, and I do believe it starts in our home. It doesn't matter
Hmm.
what home you live in. That's exactly where it stems from. So I appreciate you stepping in and serving that to your son. So.
Hmm.
Well, I know our conversation today won't be exactly addressing the current moment we're in, although I do believe our conversation will be how we could best serve others in our lifetime, which I
Hmm.
know is much needed today. And that's truly what's important. So, Kyle, I would love if you could give us a little snippet of your background and what brought you into sharing with others your life experiences and the experience of how to create or the experiences that you create for others as well.
Sure. Yeah. So, and we have to kind of rewind the clock quite a bit, as in most people's story, because what you see now is just a series of decisions and changes that happen through a period of time. So, we're looking at just a really interesting time in our economy, as well as we look at finances. And it's interesting because I step into it, and my wife and I step into it from a place of being completely debt free, 100% our mortgage and everything, and having some liquidity to say, okay, what are some opportunities to jump on? How can we help those in need without having to think twice about it? And quite honestly, Erica, it's stepping into a place of being a really, the kind of dad and a kind of husband that I want to be, that can confidently lead through a tough time. And the reason why I'm so proud of that is because you got to rewind the clock again, as I said, to the Great Recession from 12 years ago. And I went into that from 100% opposite place, from a place of financially being uneducated, a place of ego, a place of wanting to hit some sort of financial home run. And that all caught up with me at the tail end of that recession when, don't laugh, but I cashed out all of my retirement. I paid all the penalties, all the taxes, which many people know is a big no-no. And I bought gold. And I bought it because I'm listening to all the people build up propaganda, the doomsdayers saying, buy gold, buy gold. And I fell into it. I fell into that trap, and I bought it towards the peak of it, which was about $2,000 per ounce. So you can imagine, what happened from there. The price of gold absolutely tanked, and so did all of my financial dreams. And really, that was a straw that broke the camel's back. But there's a turning point, right? So a couple years after that, I'm just, sick and tired of being struggling financially, wondering, man, what am I doing wrong? And here's what I did. I log onto the Social Security website. I'm not sure if you've done it or if anyone has ever done it, but you can log on there. And I was doing it because I'm like, okay, well, how much could I get from Social Security when I retire? Trying to put together some sort of financial plan. And I'm scared, I don't really know what to look at. I log on, and I notice that they give you your life to date earnings. And that's when it hits me. So I don't know if you know that or if your listener knows that, but if you need to, take a pause, go to ssa.gov and look it up. You might be shocked what you see. And that's what I was. So we had made, my wife and I had made well over $2 million at that time, and we had absolutely nothing to show for it. Not only that, but we were about $400,000 in debt. So I'm thinking to myself, where did this all go? And that maybe that's a question you've asked or the listener has asked at some point, but that's what I was asking. And I've never felt, as a husband and aspiring father, that was such a low point in my life. I just felt so invaluable. But again, the turning point, I didn't stop there. The turning point is saying, okay, we're capable of making this kind of money. We have the skills to do it. I might not have anything to show for it, but we can learn some new things and help change our financial future. So again, where I am today, how did we get there? Anyone who's listening maybe hasn't made $1 million or 2 million. Don't count yourself out yet. So if we look at, I think the average American household earnings is $70,000, I believe. If you do 15 years of that, you're going to eclipse $1 million.
Crazy,
so
eh?
Most people are going to hit this, and they're going to go well past it. So if you're listening, I'd be thinking, okay, great, this is cool. So what did you actually do? And I think here's where some of the key learnings are, is that I faced the music. I finally got honest, and I sat down with my wife, and we had a tough, humbling conversation. Again, if you're listening, you're probably, maybe you're like, okay, I know I've got a conversation or two that is tough and it's humbling, but I need to have it, but you've been avoiding it. So listen in on this part. So it was in that very rough conversation that I felt, literally, Erica, the weight of the world just lifted off of my shoulders. And in that moment together as a couple, we enrolled into a financial literacy program. And then from there, I spent the last several years learning some of these lessons that, if you want to get into it, I would love to share some of these lessons.
Yeah, we're going to probably bounce around because
Yeah.
I know you share so many different things. So I do want to touch on a few things. Otherwise, we could split it up in 2 episodes. But
Yeah.
but either way, so let's talk about this debt, because I know your story. One of the things you do share is that you and your wife paid off about $380,000, almost
Yep.
$400,000 in 38 months, which is absolutely incredible. That I don't think anybody could even possibly fathom.
Yeah.
And I want to hear what kind of debt that was, what were some of the main
Yeah.
pockets those were in, and
Yeah.
what was the first steps you took, because you did have that reality check, like something needs to change. If we made $2 million, nothing to show for it, and otherwise than debt. So
Yeah.
now what?
Yeah. So I'll break that down. So the majority of that debt was our mortgage. And most people will look, and we had a little bit of a car loan, and we had a condo mortgage as well that we had been renting out, but it wasn't cash flowing. So most people look at it like, well, that's pretty normal. That's not outside of what a lot of people do. And I think for us, we were so convicted by, we do not want to have any debt. We felt like debt was really a burden to us that is weighing us down. And now if you look at the position that, again, the current environment and the current economy that we're in, people are freaking out.
Mm.
Now, if you're in debt, think of, okay, if I didn't have any debt, what business could I start without having to worry about, I've got to put food on the table? And there's a different sense and a different piece around that we have. And I just thought that was really important for us because it allowed us to have really the ability to choose, the ability to have the freedom that we want to have, the ability to right now help out anyone who might be in need. When we launched the podcast that I have, we helped build houses in Malawi for some of the things that we did, and we donated here locally to feed 2,500 kids that were in need during the coronavirus. So for us, it was, okay, this is probably normal, this debt, a mortgage, two mortgages, and a car. But we just felt that, okay, if we didn't have any debt, what would life look like for us? And we allowed that why, I guess, so to speak, to really pull to be pulled into the future of stepping into what would life look like without debt.
Mm. Amazing. Yes, I think so many people, or the people that own a house, they have mortgage. They don't think of that as like their debt because it's normal, right? A lot of people don't even pay off their homes in
Mm-hmm.
like 25 years, if not that even. But so as far as the first steps you took, because a part of your story is you actually became a stay-at-home dad, which is
Yeah.
even more fascinating. Is how did you too pay off that much money when you were a stay-at-home dad? So I want to know, like, what were the initial steps you
Yeah.
took?
Yes, it's a great question, and that is a part of our story that I love to share. And so thanks for asking. So when we started it, we had two incomes. I left corporate America. I was completely burned out of that, and that's a whole nother episode that we could talk about. But I got so burned out, I went into teaching, and I love teaching. And I was teaching personal finance, oddly enough. And when we had our son Cal in March of 2017, I finished out the school year. My wife did her maternity leave, and then I came home. And we said, well, if another position would open up that I'd like to teach at, I would do it. If not, I would stay home. It was important for us to have one person at home with our son when he was growing up. That was just something that we chose to do, and it became me. And it's a high honor. I have got such an amazing relationship with my son. I wouldn't trade it for the world. But my wife was in a job that she loved. It had a lot of flexibility, and her income was mainly based on commissions.
Mm.
And I know my wife really well, and she is a hard worker. And we knew, even though it might look like externally that we're taking a step back by going from two incomes to one, we knew that in doing that, it would allow my wife to go out and crush it, and
Mm.
crush it. She did. And so I had to change completely in my head. If we look at ego, I had to completely strip my ego out of the equation, because Erica, when you go out to like a social gathering and you're getting to know people, what's the first question that people ask you?
Of course, what do you do?
What do you do? And
Yeah.
so I'm standing in a circle of people, and the questions coming to me, and I'm just thinking like, oh no, oh no, oh no. And then I'm like, they're going to ask, and I'm like, I'm a stay-at-home dad. And some people are like, whoa, that's cool. And then some people just kind of like, it gets really awkward and they just kind of go and talk to someone else. So I had to strip my ego and meet my ego out and say, how am I providing for my family during this time? And also knowing that this is a season this is just a few pages of our story. And I stayed home, and it's been so much fun. And I've gotten into entrepreneurship now, and offering my own experiences and coaching and things like that. But it was, it was a great time. And we just knew that, taking a step back, rethinking everything was a part of this process for us.
Hmm. Okay, so thank you for sharing that part of it, because it's like you said, it's a interesting little. It's a different perspective because usually one person can pay off that much debt.
Hmm.
And so it's interesting to hear from your guys' story that you did it as a stay-at-home dad. So what were the first steps you took?
Yeah, first steps. So the lessons that I really share, and there's four of them really, but it's I don't control the circumstances, but I do control the outcome. The lesson really is, the outcome is really just a sum of decisions combined with the circumstances that I've been given. So we made a series of decisions, and those decisions look like, okay, are there expenses that we can reduce in the short term, that can help us catapult and get ahead into the long term? Um, and it was enrolling in a financial literacy program, because we really had to become humble and say, what we've done has gotten us what we've gotten, and if we want something different, we need to do something different. And that's a humbling conversation in and of itself. So that's understanding that, okay, I don't control the circumstances, but I do control the outcome. And here's the second part, and this is kind of tactical, but it's a team effort. So, again, the pride in me was saying, I'm going to run this family. I'm going to take charge of the finances. Everything's going to be okay. Obviously, I did not do a good job of that. And it's a team effort. And if you're listening, and you're married, or you've got a relationship and you work through finances together, one person is probably more naturally inclined to do the finances, the budgeting, paying the bills. Maybe you do a spreadsheet, maybe you do an app that helps you. One person probably geeks out about that, and the other person probably hates it. And that's okay. But what I think is really important is that you work together, and that all parties have to at least be caught up and aware of the current financial picture as it relates to your long term and your goals.
Hmm.
So make sure that someone hears that, because opposites usually attract. And one person's probably very analytical, and one person probably isn't. And so that analytical person probably really likes the numbers. So then number three is really just, this kind of ties into the question you asked, and it's kind of rethink everything. I stayed home. And it was a tough decision for me, a man with an ego, and it was a tough decision for my wife too. It was tough for both of us, but we knew that if we kind of took this step back, it would give us a running start. And I think also important here, as you look at your expenses and you look at reducing things, you also have to take a look at who's in your life. Like, who are the people in your life that also might be a bit of a burden, and you might have to distance yourself a little bit from that too. And then the fourth one, which is the fourth lesson, which is probably the most important, but it really can't be done unless you understand one, two, and three here. But it's put your sights on a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal, right? If anyone's heard of Jim Collins, the author. Because otherwise, what is it all for? If you don't have an extraordinary goal to live an extraordinary life, you are not going to make those sacrifices that you have to do. So those are kind of the four lessons. I mean, really, then I've dedicated myself really to helping, especially men, not go down this path that I was headed, which really, it's easy to accidentally go down it. And it's a path of ego, and it's a path of poor decision making, as opposed to learning these really four lessons.
Mm.
So those are the four things, and the whole thing that I learned. So if no one else learns anything from this episode, it's this, that, and this is kind of, my tagline. It's that you don't have to sacrifice your personal balance sheet for your professional balance sheet,
Mhm.
because honestly, I was focusing on the wrong things. And it doesn't matter if I was a success at work, if I was failing at home. And that to me is the most important lesson out of all these. It's not financial related, it's everything related.
Absolutely. And that's why I wanted to touch on this part, because I feel that this has to do with actually what you have birthed from it. And I think, if I've heard your story correctly, that because you did work in corporate for many, many years, you felt at the end of it that you weren't really truly fulfilled, that there was
Yep.
missing something. And so I know that you talk a lot about fulfillment, which
Hmm.
I love because I do believe there should be a balance between all areas of your life, family, relationships, work, and fun, and faith and everything. So I would love if you could share, what is fulfillment to you, and what did you discover within this position you were put in to pay off the debt, and then also to birth something else from it?
Yeah. Amazing questions. And so really how I define fulfillment is really using our gifts, our talents, and the story that we have to make an impact on as many people as we possibly can. So that's really how I define fulfillment. And I think that that should be our professional target, not achievements and not successes and not the corner office. Those things and the money, those things might come when you're focused on the right thing, but don't make that your target. And so that was the trap that I fell into in, kind of my upper 20s and my lower 30s. If you ask me how I define success, it'd probably be materialistic. It would probably relate to the size of the paycheck and a corner office. And in doing that, I found that when I would achieve it, it was empty and it was not fulfilling. I was like, what am I missing here? And that's really, that going down that path will get you down a path of burnout really, really fast. And that's the path that I was on. I was completely miserable, although externally, everything looked good. I had a good title, making good money, had all the things, but I was completely miserable on the inside. And so you asked then, what did that birth? And so I've been sharing the message of work-life rhythm, not work-life balance. And I'm helping men step into some of that rhythm and give men, especially men, kind of what they're looking for, which is connection, which is experiencing things, making an impact and living a life of success, and doing that through having really fun experiences that I create.
I love it that you call yourself the experience creator too. I think that's amazing, and I love that. I absolutely love that, and I would love to talk about what you birthed from that. But let's talk about the rhythm, the work life rhythm. And
Yeah.
so, what is that? What define that to us?
Yeah. So I kind of, I think when we hear the words work-life balance, a lot of us probably laugh and giggle a little bit because we're like, well, that's not really sustained. I mean, maybe you can achieve it, but you might not be able to sustain it. And if you're like me and probably driven by like accomplishments and achievements, we sometimes forget that, hey, you have to rest. You have to recharge yourself. So as an entrepreneur or a workplace professional, doesn't matter, right? We wear all the hats and we're in relationships, and maybe we have kids, we have friends, we have passions, hobbies, but it really can be a slippery slope. And a lot of that can lead to things like cynicism. And if you're like me, burnout. And that, if you've ever been burnout, if the listeners paying attention here, burnout doesn't just affect your professional life, it affects your personal life. It
Everything.
spills over. So I said, okay, work-life balance doesn't make sense. What about work-life rhythm? And so that's kind of what I talk about. And if anyone's do you do golf by chance, Erica?
No, but my boyfriend's a golfer, and I know golfers, so
Okay, so you'll get it. So if you play golf, I like to play golf, and I can drive the ball off a tee kind of far, not always straight, but kind of far. But when it comes to putting or anything around the green, I'm terrible. I mean, you can probably put me down for a 3-putt. So I think to get a good golf score, you have to be able to play the long game and the short game. So I view sustaining high performance similar in that you've got to be able to work hard for a period of time, and you've got to be able to rest and recharge. They're like the twin engines of high performance. So that's kind of how I look at it. And so I teach work-life rhythm through a really fun video that I've created, and I use Post-it notes, and it's a creative process where I ask people to just dedicate maybe 45 minutes to an hour, maybe get a glass of wine or whatever you might like to do to help creativity, and use Post-its to visually help you understand where are you out of rhythm and how can you add more rhythm to your life by just thinking about things that you can do to recharge you. And then, as you know, things that get scheduled get done. Put it into your calendar.
Ugh, Yes. Well, I actually got your free resource on this last night because you share a free resource that helps
Yeah.
you, like you're talking about the post-its and everything. I haven't read it over, but that is one thing that I feel I struggle a little bit in. I work
Mm,
pretty hard and I feel I'm a adventure junkie and I love nature. So if I don't get that, I feel burnt out or
hmm.
just my energy is stripped. And I realize that, but I keep on repeating the same thing over and over. So I know that I personally need to work on that. So I got your free resource. I haven't read it yet,
Fun.
but I encourage people to look into that. So, because obviously you deeply believe in that and you
Yeah.
experience burnout, you talk about
Yeah.
burnout. So let's go into your experiences that you
Yeah.
create. And to my knowledge, you only serve this to men right now, but I would love to, if you could share your company that you birthed from
Yeah.
this experience.
Yeah. And so, it serves men. And that's honestly, Erica, that's kind of accidental. That was not by design. Last fall, I held my first experience on the North Shore of Minnesota. So it's a bit north of the Twin Cities, along Lake Superior. And it happened to be all guys that showed up. It's not how I marketed it. It's just the way it turned out. And it was a beautiful process that unfolded because it was really clear to me that the men that were there needed a space where they felt comfortable sharing some of the things that they were working on, struggling with, challenged by. And I don't know if they would have done it in if it was men and women. So I'm like, okay, maybe there's something to this. Um, I think men kind of struggle with saying, hey, I could use some connections. I could use, just hanging out with like-minded guys and moving things forward. And so I was like, okay, this obvious to me that I've got to do it. So then this past winter we went dog sledding in northern Minnesota in the winter, which was so much fun. I've never had, it was a blast. And it was supposed to hold a golf event in May. And as everyone knows, coronavirus happened. So that got pushed out to October. And I want to focus on golf experiences for a couple of reasons, because the average round of golf is 4 to 4.5 hours. So if I can do a good job of putting the right men in these experiences, they will mastermind together on their own. All I have to do is open up the container for them and make it feel safe, make it feel comfortable, non-judgmental. We'll golf, we'll have fun. So the next one is going to be in October. It's in North Carolina at Pinehurst. So if anyone's a golfer, they'll recognize that name. It's a huge, really popular golf course. And then I happen to know a couple guys 70 miles west that they are the NASCAR pit crew coaches for Chip Ganassi Racing. I know nothing about NASCAR, Erica, but we'll have the opportunity to completely do a pit stop with the actual team in an actual NASCAR. It'll be so cool. So that's the next event. And we haven't landed on the name for this one. I'm going to kind of create a new offering, but I'm leaning towards a few good men. So that's what's coming. But if you
I
go to
like
my
it.
website, there will be more information there.
And your company's called Reaching Beyond
Yeah,
Experience.
called Reaching Beyond. Yep, and so is the podcast.
Yeah. So, so in these experiences, for example, the dog sledding, so I'm assuming that's a day experience. So
Hmm.
is your point of it is for men to kind of open up and kind of just like-minded individuals chit chat and kind of like you said, a mastermind. Is that the
Yep.
point of it? Or is it so they're kind of stepping away from the stress of their careers and whatnot, and for them to kind of relieve and
Yeah.
experience life outside their comfort zone?
It's a bit of both. It's to drop, the high performer, high achiever has a hard time not working. But if
Mhm.
I can force them to do that, that'll help relieve some of that stress and pressure. And then if I can put them around the right people, so the dog sledding, for example, you're on a sled and there's two people on the sled for a couple hours. So if I can get the right people together, I just know that the right conversations will happen.
Mm.
It might sound like it's all coincidental, but it is all extremely intentional in how it's designed. Being a former teacher, I'm really intentional with the design of all these experiences to maximize it. So yes, there's, removing from your day-to-day and your work and having fun and, kind of having that stress relief, work-life rhythm. But then there's also the intentional component to bringing guys together over curated experiences and dinners that are kind of exclusive and just for the group, and having the group come together and talk about things that are going on that maybe they wouldn't otherwise do it. But after they connect with guys over a round of golf or their dog sledding, they feel comfortable doing that. I mean, you can't do that immediately. So there has to be a lot of intentionality behind it.
I love it. I love it. And do you plan to market it to women eventually, or like do you plan to keep it separate if you do?
It depends. So the dog sledding one, we were all in one house. We had just rented a house. So it kind of depends on what the experience is. I really would like to have men and women just because I've been around those masterminds and they're great. The balance of the energy of is perfect, and that's what I want. But if the venue is such like that dog sledding, I won't do it.
Sure.
So eventually I will, and I'd love to share one that I have coming, but it just isn't quite ready yet. But there you can expect it in the future. Yes.
Amazing, amazing. And so going back onto or in the conversation of fulfillment,
Hmm.
why do you feel fulfillment is something we should strive for opposed to actually success? The
Mm,
difference between those. I would love if you could share that because I'm very much in line with this. I believe, we need to fulfill ourselves in our passions and be also fulfilling a purpose in life. And I believe that's where the balance comes in creating that fulfillment. So,
yeah. So I'm going to answer this a certain way because in the podcast that I have, one of the first few questions is how do you define success?
mhm.
And those that just have an energy about them that is magnetic and you want to be around. It's all about other people. It's all other centered. And usually the answer to this for a high performer, high achiever has evolved over time. And they will say my definition of success was really a self-centered pursuit. It was really selfish. It was all about me. How are people going to look at me, perceive me? What are the cars that I'm driving? What are, all these things that are all focusing right here on me. But if you focus on fulfillment and that you use that to define your success, it's always other centered and it's making an impact on other people.
I love that. Yeah, I love that so much. So, as far as what did you discover? Because, like I said, I'm a venture junkie, and it sounds like you are trying to incorporate adventure into people's lives. So, what do you feel adventure does to people, or these experiences? What do you think it really does to them?
This is such a fun question because I'm so much of an adrenaline junkie.
Yeah.
So what on the first experience that we had, I brought a helicopter in from the airport to land at the resort, and I had the guy. They didn't know it was going to happen, and the hotel hasn't had a helicopter land there in years, and everyone was all excited. But I think what happens is there's a few things. You get really excited, you experience something that gets your heart beating faster. You
Mhm.
experience it with other people, and it draws a really close bond to someone because, like, hey, remember that when we jumped in the helicopter and I was scared, you were kind of scared. We did that together. And I think when you can add that component to any experience with people, it draws a really strong bond with people.
Mhm.
And then you're more willing to have conversations that maybe would be considered somewhat showing some vulnerability. And that to me is what adding adventure and adrenaline and all these things really does, is it allows conversations to happen that might not have normally happened otherwise. Because you could do that helicopter experience. People are kind of nervous. I mean, you're maybe a couple 100 feet up from waterfalls is where we were. And it took some courage for some guys to do that. And then you come down from that experience and you can say, hey guys, where else is fear stopping you in your life?
Mm.
Because you just overcame some of that fear. Where else is it showing up, and how do we support you get over it? How do we support you getting over that fear? So I think that's kind of the secret sauce to it.
Absolutely, and it brings out your childlike wonder.
Yes.
It's so good. It's so good. I heard once Tony Robbins say that if you are in a spontaneous situation, that is where your authentic self comes out. And
Yeah.
it's very interesting when you think of it that way, because that's true. If you were like, for example, you witnessed when you brought in the helicopter, people were like, and like they
Yeah.
got all giddy and like
Yep.
really fascinated. And you see them come alive in their own natural way, right? So
Yeah.
it's really quite beautiful.
Yeah.
So amazing. I love it. And is there anything what else would you say about building fulfillment in our lives? Or like what should we start looking at or reprogramming in our lives? Again, going back to the rhythm.
Hmm.
Is there anything that, because you create your experience creator, so I'm curious, how do you look at things in your life personally to really build bring in more fulfillment?
Oh, I love what you just said about kind of the childlike. So I have my son is 3, and so I'm witnessing it daily, and it's just seeing the joy in his face over just the simplest things. I think as we get older, we kind of dampen that childlike play and that fun and the simplicity of it all. And so being reminded of that from my son every single day, in terms of fulfillment, move towards what's fun, move towards play, move towards simplicity. And I think those are the messages that, I'm just kind of speaking towards what I'm learning right now with my 3-year-old. And I think that's really important and if you lose sight of that, go hang out with the little kid for a little bit and then give him back to their mom and dad. But, go hang out with a little kid and just, hey, how can I learn from this? Because they aren't worried about all the things that as adults we are, and just step into that for a little bit and allow that curiosity that a child has too, to really drive you towards asking questions and having fun and just playing. To me, that's what comes to mind. And you can't take the smile off my face right now as I talk about my son, but that's what I'm learning from him, and that's what I would share on that too.
That's amazing. And do you feel like, especially during COVID, I realized, or at least I'll speak for myself, during COVID, I think it gave the chance for people to kind of look at the career they're in, the career
Hmm.
path they're in, and really revisit, like, is this really what I want to do? Is this the passion and purpose I want to serve? Do you feel like we need to check in with ourselves more often than not to see if we're on the right path?
Yeah, absolutely. I think reflecting on what we're doing should be a practice that's put into our schedule quite often. And if it isn't drawing fulfillment, question it. I think that's our professional target. It's always to ask myself, am I using what I've been given to serve other people and to make an impact? And if the answer is not a resounding yes, figure out why, and maybe figure out what needs to be changed. And you don't have to drastically change professional direction. Maybe there's a small tweak towards it. But yeah, absolutely, reflecting is an important practice to have, and it's an important part of work-life rhythm as well. And we've been given the opportunity here to hit the reset button a little bit and say, if I'm not finding fulfillment, how do I make some changes? So absolutely reflect.
Yeah, yeah. And actually going into this, when you're building your experiences, I'm assuming that there's travel being a
Mhm.
part of it. You know how a lot of people will say they go on vacation, they're like, "Oh, I need a vacation now," when they return back home. Why do you think people say that? What do you think's missing there?
I love this question. I'm guilty of this too. So you
For
look
sure.
at what a lot of times happens is we go to an all-inclusive resort. We get the special little wristband, and we overindulge on food and drink, and we come back and we're like, man, I need a vacation from that vacation, because we spend so much time escaping our world and escaping our reality that you never address the actual problem. You're just running away from it, but you'll never outrun it unless you actually address it. So I think that a lot of people fall into this because it's really, a vacation is an escape. And you want to build a life where you're not having to escape it through some sort of vacation, because you always have to come back to it. And again, I am guilty of that too. I've been to, the Mexico, Cancun, all that. I've done that myself. And so I'm not knocking anyone who's done it. I'm guilty too. But build a life where you don't have to vacation away or escape away from it.
Yeah, amen to that. And so I know you've dived a lot into personal development. I would love if you could touch on what's been the biggest lesson you've learned in your personal development?
Mm, good question. And I think of 2 years ago, not quite 2 years ago, in September of 2018, I finished my first Ironman. And it's amazing when I look at that, because I started almost a year out and I tracked all my workouts. I tracked virtually everything because I wanted to really see the progress of it all. And, I would say that, the finish line happens like this. It happens so fast and you achieve a goal. And you really need to enjoy the journey, because that's truly where the joy is. And if I look back on that, my first time swimming in a pool, I couldn't even swim for 15 minutes without stopping. And when I'm at the end of that training, it was doing 90 minutes and it was fine. And same thing with the bike. I would bike for about 30 minutes and I was exhausted. My legs were tired. My longest training routes were 6.5 hours. And then on the run, it's a 15-minute run. And I would be, tired when I would first start. And I did, 3.5 towards the end of it. So you really have to enjoy the process and not always look towards the goal. You'll get the goal if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, but you really have to enjoy it, because that finish line, you'll get there, it'll happen like that. And then you'll miss all that journey. And that's where truly the growth is, in all that journey.
Ooh, I love that. That's so important to really share that perspective, because once you get to the finish line, you'll be like, oh, well, now what do I,
What's next?
yeah,
What is next? Yeah.
yeah, there'll always be a next if
Yes.
you're an ambitious person, at least. So
Yes.
I love this. I mean, like I said, I'm such a big believer in that. I I know you talk about rhythm, and it's hard to not say that balance, because that's the
Yep.
first word I think of when I think of, having the balance between everything. But like I said, I got your free resource, so I'm very curious to learn. Yeah, I'm like, I'm on it. That's
Yep.
something that I always struggle with, is managing my
Mhm.
time between my pursuits, and I
Yep.
know I do get burnout,
Yep.
because being an adventure junkie, you seek that often.
Mhm.
so, so I think it's important to learn how to create that rhythm and really bring fulfillment into your life in the best possible way you can, in your own unique way. So I love
Yeah.
what you're creating, and when I
Thank you.
read everything about you, I was so intrigued, because I'm like, this is my jam. This is what
Yeah.
I want to step into, and I believe like it needs to be served on to more people, creating these experiences, because I think that as we get older, we let go of that childlike wonder, as we talked about.
Yes.
we
Yes, we
we're
do.
hustling all the time, and we're missing really what life is about, which is relationships, family, our faith, our experiences. That's what we're
Mhm.
going to remember at the end of the day. So that's so critical. That
Yeah.
really is. And
Yeah.
like I said, this conversation is really, you know what's so important is we do need to move forward in life. We have to really create our own sanctuary, if you want to say. But it's hard to have conversations these days when we're having a lot of chaos going around us, really heartfelt chaos, if you want to say.
Mhm.
And before we started this conversation, I had to take a deep breath, because it weighs on my heart so much, all the pain.
Yeah.
And but I so appreciate having this conversation, and all you share into the world. And I know you're a man of service as well, and I know that we have to continue stepping into that space. And so, just in closure, I do ask all my guests the same question. And one of those questions is, if you were to write a book, which I don't think you have yet,
Mhm.
what would be one piece of advice you would share with others on the first page, if you have not shared it yet?
Ooh, good one. Oh, that's a good question. There's a quote that comes to mind, and I really like it because it's really inspiring to me. So I'll share it, and I might get this wrong, so don't quote unquote, but it's something like, though not everything that we face can be changed, nothing can be changed until we face it. And I think that has been a bit of my kind of what I allow to guide me. And it's that, okay, we can really, words are fine, but your action is what's most important. And not all that is shown, and a lot of it's behind the scenes, but it doesn't matter. To me, what's most important is that you're doing something about something you're passionate about. And I like that quote. So I'd probably share that.
I love that. And really that's how change happens, is when we're willing to face what needs to be changed. And I posted something actually on Instagram this morning in regards to that, as sometimes we have to hit rock bottom to really wake up and see what
Yep.
needs to change. But
Yep.
regardless, that's what's needed, is when we're able to face it. I
Hmm.
love that. And then what does a passionate, purposeful life look like to you? Which I think you could probably answer this quite well.
Yeah, and that's why I reached out, because I'm like, we have such a similar jam that we've got to get together and share. And so I kind of go back. I define it almost as fulfillment, which again would be using our gifts, using our talents, using all the things we've learned and our story, because everyone has a unique story that can impact people. You cannot you don't allow yourself to compare to someone else's story, but when we use all those, our gifts, our talents, and our story, and we make a positive impact on other people, that to me um, is how I would answer that. It goes back to me to fulfillment.
I love it. Perfect. Well, this has been such an honor, Kyle. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you. And I send you much love, and for your safety during this time
Mm.
that we're in. And you're in Minneapolis. So, you know, um, I know it must be even harder. I'm in Los Angeles, and it's quite, I mean, what's going on here is a lot, but I'm sure it's a lot where you're at.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. And same to you. Thank you.